Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXE EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show where I am delighted to be joined by William Ulmer, Senior Manager, Contingent Workforce Program at Fandool. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Will, I'm going to shorten your name in true British-Irish fashion, so hopefully you won't be too upset with me. But for those of you unfamiliar with Will, Will has been a leading light in the contingent workforce sector from what I would describe as the buy side or the procurement side. Will has put out some really interesting content on the social channels relating to contingent workforce best practice and really a more modern way of doing things. And I've really enjoyed Will's content over the years, and I'm really looking forward and excited to be talking to you, Will. So, Will, how the hell are you? A warm welcome to the show.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. Really been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. I can't thank you enough for allowing me to hit you up and say, hey, can I be on your podcast?
Well, Will, I love it. And it really made me happy because it saved me the trouble, because you're definitely someone that I really wanted on the show. So thanks ever so much. So, well, let's start where we always start on the show. What's your story? What's the pop quiz Will Ulmer story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started as an agency recruiter, fresh out of college. I graduated in 2009 with a finance degree, so I think everybody remembers what was going on in 2009. Finance wasn't really hiring. So somebody
Yes.
directed me to say, hey, you talk to a lot of people. You're pretty good at it. Maybe you should be a recruiter. And that's where I ended up. So I worked in the agency side for about 4 years, and then I don't know how, and still to this day, can't really put my finger on how I ended up on the other side of the table, but I did. And it's been just an awesome journey since then, and couldn't be more happy with where I am and being part of this industry, understanding both sides of the table. And so, yeah, it's been I think like 7 or 8 years now, maybe a little bit longer that I've been on the buy side, but spent a pretty good amount of time on the sell side too. So bring kind of a unique perspective to both, to my current role and what we're trying to accomplish in programs and the programs that I've been fortunate enough to run and manage.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I think many of our guests started off on the agency sales side, myself included. I think probably one of the most difficult jobs I've ever done. Actually, obviously, there's a lot of upside to it if you're good at it, and I was lucky enough to be reasonably good at it and enjoyed the upside. Yeah. But it's a hard job. It is bloody hard. Would you agree, Will?
Oh, it's a grind, right? But it's funny. I'm always extremely thankful for the opportunity that I had to work on the agency side, because it led me to this side. And more importantly, I think it led me to understand kind of the industry that we're in, right? There's so many complex environments that we work in. And if we don't understand them from both sides, it makes it really difficult from the buy side to kind of do your job more efficiently, and understand kind of how everything works on the sell side. So I've always been, while it was an extreme grind and, probably shaved years off my life, it was worth every second. And I wouldn't say I'd go back and do it again, but I'm very thankful for the start that I had.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will. I take all that on board. I still wonder to myself, could I go back and do it? I probably could if I had to, just to test myself, you know what I mean, to see if I would compete with some of the young guns out there. But I think it gives you a really valuable perspective on the MSP side, Will, when you're running programs, or if you're like someone like me that's, deploying programs on behalf of the end client and the end user. Because, many times I've been in supplier negotiations and I know exactly what the other party's thinking, what the CEO of the recruitment company or the vendor's thinking. And I think that brings a unique sympathy and empathy to where they're coming from, particularly if you go into new markets. I told this story recently, Will, about launching an MSP program in Poland. And I remember sitting down with the recruitment company, one of the recruitment company CEOs. I think there's maybe 14 or so vendors coming in, and they'd never heard of an MSP before, right, in Poland, in this part of Poland. And the guy was like nearly crying, or I think he did cry, and saying, "Are you guys going to take my business?" I'm like, "Geez, no way. We're here to actually help you, right?" But you can really, it gives you that real in-depth understanding of what they're thinking and what they're going through. So I agree with you. I think it's a bit of a superpower, particularly as you move more into the buy side, or in my case, the solution side. But, well, tell me about your role. What are the problems and challenges that you're solving for at Fandool?
Yeah, so right now, our big kind of push right now is just to gain the visibility into our contingent workforce and start to drive our utilization in a more efficient manner. It's kind of a short answer for a very complex problem. And a lot of complex operations, but I think we're gonna see a lot of really fun things come out of kind of just solving those core basic fundamentals of a contingent labor program. How are we using them? How can we leverage them more efficiently? How can we drive more business success and really meet the goals of the business? So those are kind of our initial problems, right? We're first generation program, and driving driving to those two kind of core fundamentals, right? Efficiency gains and visibility. And with that comes, I think, a lot of other fun avenues to start exploring how we can leverage the contingent labor, population across, Fandool and across all of our business entities that we currently have.
Yeah, it sounds like exciting. I always think first gen programs are so bloody exciting, Will, right? Because you've almost got a blank canvas, right? You've got a great opportunity to do things completely different, right? Because, if you're in a second, third generation program, it can often be tricky to do something a bit more innovative, right? And you've got limited levers as well when it comes to cost savings and cost optimization and all that. But, well, I was hoping to tap into your brain, if you don't mind, particularly for the benefit of our audience. So you've got like 8-9 years experience in the on the buy side now. Like for buyers that are sitting listening to our conversation today, like what are the common challenges and things to look out for if they're considering embarking on an MSP program, whether it's external MSP program or indeed they're thinking, well, you know what, we might just do it ourselves, right? But we'll need some external help from XYZ. Would you care just to give some of your reflections over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you would have asked me this question maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have a completely different answer than I have today. And I think a lot of that is around the fact that the way of work is truly changing. And if you really want to tap into where the talent is, you need to think creatively. I think a lot of times people miss that. There's a set of industry best practices that have been established over years and years of process and experience across the industry, right? And I think that I think we're at the precipice of those changing, personally, that those industry best practices, as good as they are and as fundamental as they are, I think it's time, and it's well past time maybe, to start thinking about things in a little bit different way. And that's kind of what draws me to first generation programs, is that you don't necessarily have to be bound by industry best practices, because you have the world's your oyster, right? You can go out and do things that are more creative and more fun. Tap into new talent channels, harness the gig economy, like whatever it might be, you can make what you want to make. And so I think that's where I find myself most excited about embarking on kind of challenges of a first generation program, is that you really get to think more creatively. And I think that there's a natural change that's occurring in the industry right now where people are not necessarily bound to the old ways of doing it, quote unquote, right? Old ways. I don't want to refer to it as that, but there is a lot of new opportunities and new talent channels that are out there for us as program managers that we get to be creative with and start to harness, if we can kind of release some of the chains of the industry best practices and the old ways of doing things. So my biggest advice on that one would be just think creatively. If you need the talent, how are you going to go find it, and what possible way can you harness that and be more efficient with your operations?
Yeah, I love that piece of advice, particularly that last thing, because I've been in this sector, I think, God, in the MSP, RPO, on-demand talent. I've been in tech, I've been in marketplace, exchange, platforms, CXE, we do payroll, brokering, EOR, AOR, MSP, internal MSP, all this stuff, right? So it's all really exciting. But one of the things that I suppose has interested me, fascinated me over the last 9 to 10 years in this space is actually the reluctance to innovate, right? Many people have talked about direct sourcing, talent pools, talent marketplaces, talent platforms, right? Everyone's talking about total talent, right? About having this single view of talent within your organization, right? That hasn't really happened, right? And if I think about the evolution, particularly of talent marketplaces, well, like I think from last count, there was over 300 talent marketplaces of various different sizes and scale. You've got ones like Work Anna, right, down in Latin America that are expanded into the USA. They're adding 1 million people a month to their platform, right? You got freelancer.com, upwork.com, huge, right? You know, last count, I think freelancer.com had nearly like 100 million people on their platform right now. Of course, always the question is how many are utilized, how often, what are they paid, where are they based, what's the compliance challenge, all that, right? But it strikes me that the marketplaces and the talent platforms on a general basis, of course, will have what enterprises need, which is talent, right? But they don't have the means at the moment to work with enterprise companies to distribute that talent in a compliant, governed fashion, right? The enterprises traditionally aren't set up to work with marketplaces, Will. And I suppose my question is, it's a rather long way of getting to the point, isn't it? But thanks for bearing with me. I think my point and my question is, why hasn't there been innovation in this sector, Will, at scale and size? Why have organizations, particularly the larger ones, not started to work more generally with marketplaces, specifically talent marketplaces? What's your thoughts on that? I'd love to tap into your thoughts, mate.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, first off, it's scary to change, right? I mean, it's very scary to innovate. And that, I think, a lot of times drives people to get comfortable and sit in those comfortable chairs and you know, just keep the gears turning. If it's working one way, it's going to continue to work that way. And if you're continuing to get talent, but I feel like in a lot of times what you see in these big programs is that there's always this churn of we need new suppliers. Because they're always having to do some evaluation criteria on their suppliers. The KPIs are just blown out of proportion, and they're KPI'd to death, and they're SLA'd to death, and it's very hard for these suppliers to meet some of those demands, I think. But I think that that's what we talked about earlier, right? That's where the change is coming, is that the workers, the talent, is actually getting better about broadcasting who they are and where they are, and they're putting themselves in a better position, I think, to force the change. And I think the kind of the workers and the passion economy that's come out of this, some of the recent change over the past couple of years, is actually going to drive the innovation, which is, I think, the right thing. It's that if we as programs start to develop what we think is the next step in the evolution of contingent labor programs, we're not actually tapping into what the talent thinks the evolution is. And so I think it has to naturally come from the talent, and say the talent is going to drive what the evolution looks like, and we have to meet them there, right? We have to put our line in the water, when we, like fishing analogy, right? We have to put our line in the water where the talent is swimming. And if they're swimming in a certain lane, we have to meet them there. And I think that's what's been really nice, is that we've seen this come up. We've seen all the platforms come up, and the platforms have had a lot of success. And now it's going to force the change, because the talent has actually required the programs to meet them where they are. And so they're the ones driving that. They're the ones that are going to drive the change. And I think that's the reluctance, is, I think, from a program side, is that we think we know best, and we've seen people go out on a ledge and do some innovative things, and that innovation not necessarily pay off. And that's where so then we kind of get the dial back and say, okay, well, let's not get too out of our lane here.
Yeah.
We do this job, and this is what we do well. Now the talent's forcing us to make the changes.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely way to describe it. Well, I've got a question. It strikes me as potentially controversial, but what the hell, right? And the question is this. As talent marketplaces evolve further and become more adopted by the enterprise, large enterprise, medium-sized enterprise, I think in many cases the scale-up companies and the SMBs, they're not afraid to try these marketplaces, right? The procure-to-pay process is basically, finance director going, I need a IT guy or girl or person next week, right? Bing, okay, they've got that person delivered to them, a bit like Amazon, only it takes, a bit longer, right? But yeah. I suppose as that model and as the platforms and model evolves and adopts, what is the need for an MSP and a VMS? Like, do they become redundant? I remember having this conversation with Matthias, one of the founders at Worksome, on the show, and of course it's in his interest to say, well, actually, we could be the alternative to that, and that's of course fair enough, and that's his prerogative. But it did get me thinking a lot about this sector. I mean, is there a need for MSPs and the VMS as they're currently designed and operated?
That's a tough one. It's a tough question. I and I think there's layers to the question, right?
Yeah.
Layers to the answer, I guess is a better way to think about it. But I think the MSP space is evolving. So I think that when we talk about old ways of doing things, industry best practices from the past, the MSP was a major part in that, because I think programs were starting to find their legs and understand what they were doing and how they were doing it. And so having an MSP to guide them and support them was nice. Now, I think the MSP space didn't necessarily do themselves any favors for a little while there, because they didn't necessarily evolve and adapt to the customer. The customer was adapting to the MSP. Now we see the MSP adapting to the customer, which is allowing the customer to be more nimble, more agile in how they approach changes and growth from an expansion. So I think that we've talked about it already, right? But I think we're at the precipice of change within contingent labor programs, and I think the MSPs are coming along for the ride as well. When we talk about VMSs, I think there is a place for a VMS in every program. But I think some of the VMSs, the big ones, have kind of the same thing. They've kind of left the customer to the side and said, "This is how we do things. We don't adapt to what you need. You adapt to us." And that's where I think there's this nice change in the VMS space, where we have some new age kind of influence, new age tech coming into the space. It's going to change that space, and I think it's going to force these big ones to make the changes as well. So I think there is a place for a VMS, but I think VMS is changing and has to change because we're adapting to the way of work, and I think all of it changes, and that's where I think it's like I love where we are as an industry right now, because it's almost chaotic in what's coming, and nobody really knows. And everybody's kind of jockeying for position. And I think there's a lot of good things that come out of that. And that's where I'm really excited about kind of the changes. But to answer the question, I think there's a space for MSP. I think there's a space for VMS. But I think the definition of what they do and how they do it is evolving and needs to evolve.
Yeah, I share that analysis that you have outlined there. Well, I think there's certainly a role for the MSP and the VMS, but I see a trend coming, and it's not just me. I think SIA have staffing industry analysts, have similar data that supports my hypothesis. I think the trend that I'm seeing is a move more towards internally managed programs, but with some external advisory, whether it's around compliance, regulation, VMS design, VMS implementation, payrolling, tail spend, all those sort of things that typically an internal program needs to be aware of, control over, but might not want to do themselves. But I think, to your point, the days of an MSP company coming and saying, right, here's our black box. You must accept what's in our black box. If you don't, we're gone, or we can't support you, or over. And I think those MSPs that show flexibility, nimbleness, stroke agility, are more creative. To your point at the beginning of our conversation, well, I think they'll survive, and I think they'll thrive, actually, and I think that's quite exciting. I really do. But it'll be interesting, the talent marketplace space. I've seen some consolidation there. Admittedly, just very early signs of it. Will Randstad have led the forefront of this. They've acquired Twago maybe 5-6 years ago from memory. At this point, they recently acquired a really interesting platform called Torque. Of course, you had Adecco buying Hired.com some years ago. But I can see that there's two sort of mergers and consolidations happening more. Would you agree with that, Will?
I think they have to in some ways. I think, from a program side, the amount of emails that we get on a day-to-day basis from like, I'm a new supplier, how do I get signed up? It's like, it's hard to even keep track anymore about who's who. And if you don't have a brand name that's already been established from like years past, then it's hard to make the change into that. But I think there's some interesting like kind of changes that are taking place even on the sell side from a supplier side. But I do think there's going to be some consolidation, and I think there's going to be a lot of integration into where I see this going is there's a lot of integration from a partnership perspective. So certain tech, certain kind of new age AI driven recruiting mechanisms that are being built right now, driving back into some of these larger organizations to help kind of push them forward. But I do think consolidation is likely on the table for the way things are going. I think we've expanded so much in the supply side, where the sell side from staffing suppliers that. And again, I think if we go back, right, the talent is changing. The talent is changing
Correct.
where they are. And if the talent can own themselves and do what they're doing, and they can own their own brand, and then, I don't want to say like, what's the point in the supplier anymore, but like, if we see this kind of natural progression happening where the talent is becoming more available and accessible to a buy side,
Yes.
without having to go through the middle part of a supply side or from the sell side, then I think that we have to see some change happen.
Yeah, I agree, and I that's been my prediction for years, Will. But that was in my interest for years to promote that back starting in 2013. But I do think the staffing sector is still ripe for further disintermediation, and definitely further consolidation. I think there's probably still a role for staffing providers for more niche talent, or to become like talent advisory. But I think as more talent move to marketplaces, whether they're private talent marketplaces or private talent pools or general marketplaces, I think the need for staffing companies as they're currently structured is lessened for sure. But I think the smart ones are already starting to move into more talent advisory, pseudo statement of work, pseudo consulting, talent mapping, headhunting. You even see companies like Heidrick and Struggles, the premier exec search firm. They're now moving into digital and digital marketplaces. So it's interesting to see actually where they're going. But well, this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to speak with you, because I do feel that you've got a really different view to most practitioners in the sector, right? It's really interesting to have this conversation with you. And well, something I wanted to discuss, and it's something I've been thinking about and talking about now for the last 3 years. I'm sorry, listeners, if you're bored of it, but the problem and challenge hasn't went away. And it's been described as labour market paradox, right? And in short, well, what we're really talking about is you got full employment in pretty much all Western labour markets, even those that are like, almost were at recession, right? You have this high interest rate environment, although it's going down. You had loads of reduction in force, right? Particularly in the tech sector. And I know many people, unfortunately, that were adversely impacted by that and still are, particularly in the talent acquisition community. Well, like there's thousands of people currently displaced and they haven't come back into work yet on the TA side and the HR side, and also in some of the contingent workforce program side of things. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a sec. But well, I suppose we're at full employment. We're not producing enough people, right, in terms of people being born, coming into the labour force over the last 20, 30 years. and nearly every company is hiring like they're going out of fashion, right? So I suppose the question is, how do we square that circle? Is there a way to solve for this particular challenge?
It's tough because everything we're talking about right now and we've talked about, right, is that everything is kind of changing, right? And so, it's tough to see peers of mine that are sitting out there trying to identify a new opportunity. It's tough to see talent acquisition be impacted the way it is, or the way it has been. But I think we can follow the line here, right? When we talk about the talent is starting to become more owners of their own brand, and they are seeking out more of a passion type environment. And I think the passion economy has kind of led to this, right? Where we have trouble driving interest to roles that don't fit or align with people's needs.
Yes.
I think if we look back previously, I think all of us have probably worked in jobs we didn't want to work in, but we liked the paycheck and we did the job because that's what we did, right? And that's it. But I think we've seen this change so dramatically back to people wanting to say, I want to do what makes me feel fulfilled and happy and I like. And but at the same time, we haven't necessarily educated the masses on where to go in some of these environments to find the right necessarily roles. If you just, and this is kind of maybe not necessarily direct back to the answer, but we see people that are looking for new opportunities and trying to find new opportunities, but don't necessarily know how to leverage their previous skill sets to do something different. And I think that's a change that I don't know when or how that we solve that, but I think that the experience you have in talent acquisition, I think, can go in multiple different ways, and people don't necessarily know how to harness that, because if I'm a recruiter, I'm always a recruiter. That's what I do. I recruit. But how could you transition that? And I think we'll see this come back. I think that, it's always tough to watch when hiring slows down, talent acquisition gets impacted.
Yeah.
And when hiring ramps back up, obviously talent acquisition ramps back up. So I think it's an ebb and flow. Wish it wasn't that way. But again, I just think we're in such a state of change in how we hire and how we find talent that we're kind of going through the growing pains of what the future looks like right now. And I think that's just kind of one of those tough things that we got to kind of manage through. And, I wish we could hire them all back. I wish we could hire everybody. I wish everybody was employed. It's tough to watch people out there that are constantly trying to churn things and find a new opportunity, but it's just, I think we're in such a precipice, such a state of change that we don't necessarily know what the future looks like right now, that eventually I think we'll clear that hurdle and get back to it. But for right now, we just got to hang on for the ride.
Like, it's interesting, Will. If I think I've lost count of the amount of posts I've seen on LinkedIn from talent acquisition, head of talent acquisition on LinkedIn, essentially bemoaning three things. One, the lack of talent acquisition roles. Two, poor recruitment practices in large enterprise companies, right? And three, complaining about the experience that they face going through an ATS. Now, there's an irony to that in a lot of cases, talent acquisition professionals have probably selected the ATS and designed the recruitment processes, and now they're on the market and they're trying to get jobs en masse, right? And listen, having been in that position, trying to get a job at one point in my life, it's not good, right? When you're in a really bad labor market. But I suppose what my question really is, well, are ATSs fit for purpose? And also the way we screen people as organizations, do you think we should change that? And if I look at it from the following perspective, like, do you need a college degree to be a contingent workforce program manager? Do you need a college degree to be the managing director or president at CXC? Do you need a college degree to be a data analyst or XYZ, right? So, are we screening for the right things? And if we're not, are we screening people out that shouldn't be screened out from a process? I talked about this a lot. Well, a lot of people have criminal records from their youth, right, for just doing really stupid stuff, myself included, right? I'm not pleased to admit it, right? But that stuff never really leaves you, right? It's there for life, even though they say it's not, right? It's on your record, right, at some point. And if I went for a job, let's say in JP Morgan or Big Bank B, right, I'm not going to get in, because of something that happened nearly 30 years ago, right? Which was a minor misdemeanor, as it would be classed. So I suppose my question is multifaceted. Are ATSs and how we hire fit for purpose? And is there something we could do better in terms of how we screen people to bring them into our organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hard stop. Absolutely. There's a lot of things we could be doing better. I think, so coming from the agency side, and my perspective on recruiting, right, is that you really go out and work to find the candidate. I feel like that doesn't transition to internal recruiting. I feel like that you have a sourcer who finds you talent, and then you get talent fed to you, and then you might have a few phone calls and see what happens. Like, we've lost the personal touch in internal recruiting, and I don't know why. It's like it's something that, like, it almost like upsets me. Like, and I don't see a lot of it. I don't touch a lot of internal recruiting, but every time I've had an experience with internal recruiting, it feels like the personal touch is gone. And you don't really have that. And I understand we have this huge influx of candidates that are being applied to jobs, and I get that. So it's hard to keep up with every single one of them. But I think that I think internal recruiting in any big company, if they could find a way to get back to that personal touch, they would have much better success. And if they could start acting like staffing agencies, that really the only way you get paid is if you place a person. Like I don't know if any director of talent acquisition is sitting and listening to this right now, like, go back to a commission-based role for your internal recruiters and see how good your talent becomes. Now, fortunately, like with Fandool, we've got a great internal recruiting team. They're fantastic. They're great to work with. They're just top-notch people. But I think if you're having that kind of struggle, go to a commission-based recruiting and see what happens, and say, all right, you got to earn your keep. You're going to get a lot better talent. You're going to get a lot better results, because right now it's just so easy. Like, I don't like the resume, boom, off. I'm not even going to waste my time. So, that's what I say is, like, I remember just looking through resumes and saying, like, all right, I got to find some keywords, and then I got to really try to pull the layers back and see if this candidate is really legitimate. And then finding those, like, diamonds in the rough that you end up being great hires for a staffing agency placement, and then you get a nice little commission off of that. And so, like, internal recruiting. Yeah, I think that ATSs have kind of made some internal recruiting teams lazy. I think that the way that we've structured internal recruiting across, in all major corporations and companies, like, go back to a commission-based recruiting, make them earn it, and see what happens. I guarantee the talent you get, I guarantee the results you get are going to get better. But how do you flip that switch? I don't know. That's questions way above my pay grade. But I think that's the way that things would really change things. Like, stop relying on your ATS to provide you the right candidates. Stop posting and hoping that somebody's going to apply for it. Like, go out and hunt the talent down. Find the people you need. They're there. They are out there ready to work. But you're relying on ATSs, and you're relying on sourcers, and you're relying on, curators to feed you talent, and then not following up or doing anything to make it worth your time. Like, it's great to get a paycheck. It's great to get a salaried role as an internal recruiter. Yeah. But what if you had to earn that salary? I think things changed.
Wow. Well, that is radical, but very interesting concept about inverting that model. So, we're in the midst of this talent scarcity crisis, right? I think there's one about every 10 years, right? Based on my career experience to date, maybe every 8 years, right? We've got things like internal talent marketplaces, internal skills hiring, upskilling, reskilling. You got external marketplaces, you got in-house recruitment teams, you got staffing suppliers, you got loads of different channels for talent rivers, as Richard Lawson from Accenture likes to describe them. Talent pools, doesn't matter. There's multiple sources and channels for talent. But I suppose, what would be your thoughts, Will, on helping organizations beat that talent scarcity crisis? What can they do differently to find the talent that they need? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I think primarily, stop accepting that there's a talent scarcity. I don't think that's truly the case. I think that the expectations are too high for the talent that you want to receive into your organization. I think that's really why you're there. I think there's an artificial scarcity being created because we want to accept somebody with 20 years of experience in a tech that's only been around for 2 years, right? Like, and that you don't like. Everybody wants to hire at the top, but nobody wants to bring in somebody that might just be right below what you're looking for and then get them to where they want to be. I think that I don't think there's a scarcity in talent. I think there's a scarcity of knowledge on how to harness talent and how to create a job posting that's going to get you the talent that could potentially be that person you need. So, and I think there's a scarcity in how to recruit talent. I think that, we've become very reliant and I think lazy in internal recruiting teams. I will say, like, again, Fandool knocking it out of the park in how we recruit people because we're actually going out and finding talent and doing a great job at it. But I think that there's people have just become very lazy in their approach to how we recruit, right? If I post a job, I'm going to have 100 applicants and then I'm going to let the ATS weed out the resume that meets all of my key buzzwords. And then I'm going to call that person. And if they are good, great, I'll give them to the manager to take a look at. Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't, there's no such thing as a scarcity. If you look at the available talent, you have to go out and find it now. You can't necessarily hope that your job posting and you're like, if you make widgets in Wisconsin, it's going to be hard for you to find somebody to come and apply to your job.
Correct.
If you have a large brand name, that's different. But you have to create some excitement. You have to go out and find somebody that's going to be interested in your role based on what you're providing that candidate, that experience, that job opportunity. That you have to build loyalty is, I guess, kind of what I'm thinking is like internally you have to be loyal to your brand and you've got to really drive the success and you have to be advocates and champions of working here is fantastic because you can't just rely on a post and hope anymore. It's just there's too many jobs being posted to even track what it is. And then I think people just, I don't know where or when this changed, but it's like, you look at some of the jobs, like titles that are out there right now, and you're like, what does that even mean? There's like, how am I as a candidate? Let's say I'm a candidate in this role. How do I know this job based on a title is something that meets my skill set? The titles are just bananas right now. And I don't understand like who's creating these job titles. Like, at this point, like, why are we even having job titles because none of them match each other. And it's hard to go out and find jobs that, fit your skill set if the job titles don't necessarily drive you there. Like it's, your tagline has to be driven to the success. So again, I don't believe there's a scarcity. I think there's a lack of desire and drive to go find the talent that's out there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and, it's interesting, even our conversation about the staffing sector. Maybe that's a role where staffing companies do have to play in a significant role because the best recruiters are the best hunters of talent, right? They're never passive, right? They know who's who and they know how to find them and where to find them. So that's quite interesting. And there's no reason why enterprise companies or talent acquisition companies within enterprises cannot go and do that. I think it's great. I think it's great advice. The other point that the talent's out there, I do agree, Will, but I agree with it in this context that the talent's out there, but only if you're willing to go global for the talent, right? Now, are you willing, for example, you're based in the United States, but, are you willing to get talent from Ukraine, Poland, Sweden, Switzerland, Australia, Hong Kong, wherever it is, to do the work that you need doing? Because maybe the talent doesn't exist in San Francisco or North Carolina or, New Mexico or wherever. So I think there needs to be a recognition that yes, the talent is there, but the talent is also there outside of your border. Would you agree with that or disagree?
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that there's, going back to the scarcity question, right? Like, I think it's an artificial scarcity because we're unwilling or unable to look broadly at the problem, right? And broadly at the solution too. I think that the solutions are out there. I think that going global and finding the right talent is the way to do it. I mean, I think there's so many opportunities out there to find the talent where it is. And I think that a lot of people are unwilling or unable to think more broadly to the solution.
I agree with you, Will. So, one of the many things actually I've become obsessed with recently, but particularly over the last year and a half, 18 months, is artificial intelligence, and specifically artificial generative intelligence. And why I've become obsessed with it really is twofold. One, I'm really concerned about its ability to displace and replace jobs. And two, I'm really concerned about the unintended consequences of unregulated artificial intelligence, or AGI. And on the second point, I'm really conflicted about that. And the first point too. The second point, I'm a free market person. I'm a capitalist, right? I'm a capitalist that believes, so William, that society and people should be looked after, right? So, a glass of champagne in one hand, but also looking after people on the other. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, actually, right? But on the first point, in relation to AI and its impact on jobs, a lot of my thinking has been informed by World Economic Forum reports on artificial intelligence, and specifically their impact on jobs displacement. And essentially what the World Economic Forum are saying, that up to, I think, 60% of professional jobs, white-collar jobs, are going to be adversely affected by artificial intelligence. If you add that to the processing power of artificial intelligence, that's actually increasing exponentially daily, right? And if you look at what people like Ray Kurzweil and others are saying, that the power of artificial intelligence will roughly be equivalent to all human brain power by 2029, and that AI will be making significant decisions in people's life, that fills me with great concern and almost despair. And I'm a really positive guy, Will, as you know, over our recent dealings, right? So I suppose my question is, do you share those concerns specifically in the jobs displacement and people replacement, or what's your take on AI? Because it is a time of great change, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not sure I share or not share in those beliefs. I think that, as my opinion, more is the fact that we don't know what AI is really going to be capable of in the next couple of years. So how do we say it's going to displace jobs? And we don't know that. And so I think it's, we're making broad assumptions that it's going to displace everybody's jobs and it's going to impact everybody. But if we already look at it, it's really positive impact across a lot of places. We've seen a lot of positive impact from AI. And I think that's an interesting, wrinkle in time, right, to think about. But I think we're, the age-old adage, right? Like, when assumptions, right? You're making assumptions,
Oh, yes. Makes an ass out of you and me. Correct.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, who's to say what is going to happen in the future? I mean, and I think that's the beautiful part about it, too. I think that, let's think about this in a different position. Like, what is AI going to do for us that could be better than what we currently have right now, right? I mean, I think AI can really do some really positive things. Some of the stuff that I think is going to be really interesting is how can it remove like bias out of hiring? How do we start to think about it in that way? Finding the right talent at the right time, not necessarily in removing bias from the equation. I think that's something that's going to be interesting. But yeah, I don't necessarily know. I don't know if I share in all those beliefs, but I do think change will happen. But what that change look like, I think, is yet to be determined. So, I think 60% is is an aggressive number, and I don't know.
It's big, isn't it?
I don't know if I agree with it. I just, like, who knows what AI is going to do? Who knows if we can't find a way to basically like work in tandem with AI to be more productive in our daily environment and really drive the business goals that we have forward? I mean, why can't we find that happy medium instead of it being that all these people are going to lose their jobs because AI is going to go away, or AI is going to take them?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Will, that we don't know, right? And of course it could have positive uses, but being a capitalist, as you know, Will, capitalists are motivated by profit, right? And where there's a profit motive and where your competitors go, you must go. Because if you don't go there, they're going to go there. If you don't go there, you're gone. You're toast, right?
Yeah.
And when the profit motive comes into organizations and how they're run and operated, typically the biggest cost is people, right? And if you can get a saving on people which are your biggest costs for most organizations, once the profit motive kicks in, it's almost inescapable, right? So that's not typically that's not where you start, right? No one's sitting down with a blank piece of paper saying, we're going to displace all these people and that's really what we want to do. But the potential unintended consequences of that for companies, when profit comes in, when competition comes in, when efficiency comes in, that's where the risk is, in my view. And that's where the risk is around jobs, right? Now, will more jobs be created? Again, to your point, it's probably too early to tell.
Yeah. I think that, we're so early in this AI stage that broad assumptions that we're going to have 60% of the workforce impacted, I think is just that. I think it's a broad assumption without saying, why can't we go along with them with AI? If we need to retool, reskill AI and become more involved with AI. But I think that, fortunately, I think in our industry, this is a people first business. And so I think that if we lose track and we lose sight of the fact that is how this was created, right? That's why this business exists, is to connect people and put people to work and put people in better situations and impact their life in a positive way. If we lose track of that, who's to say me and you will still have a job, right? If we just let recruiter AI take care of everything, then why do we need to be here? I think that loses track. And I think people have a natural desire to be personally connected to. And if we talk about kind of the loss of that connection that we've seen from internal recruiting teams, I think the talent's going to push us in a direction that we should be in. If talent's going to say, I don't want to work with recruiter AI, I want to work with somebody that I know and can talk to and have a genuine conversation with, that's going to lead us to change. And I think that's where we're seeing things going. I mean, we talked about it multiple times today, and that's something that's top of mind for me, is that the talent's going to tell us to go. Yeah. And if the talent says, hey, we don't want to work with recruiters anymore, then, I guess our jobs are over, right? And that's how it goes. But I don't think the talent wants that. I think the talent wants to be seen, heard, felt, understood, and they should. And I think that, we, at the end of the day, we're people, and this business is people first. And if we change too far from that and the pendulum swings too far, then something's going to bring it back to equilibrium. And I think that the talent is, and the way people want to be engaged, and the way people want to work is really going to be what drives the change. Do I think other industries are going to see much more impact from AI? Yeah, absolutely. But when it comes to the contingent labor industry and all the web of people that we have in this space, I don't think we're going to lose the people first type engagements that we currently see within the market.
Good. Well, here's to that, Will, that optimistic view. So that is good. As a glass half full guy, I can definitely appreciate that. But Will, it is interesting, the contingent workforce sector, specifically in the context of organizations are always trying to reduce their cost base, right? Good way to do it is, if you think about employing someone full-time, right? A full-time employee, the cost base is pretty high. You got employer taxes, you got bonuses, you got, car allowances, expenses, and yada, 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 right? It goes on and on and on in many cases, right? Particularly as you go further up the tree of organizations, it becomes really expensive. And I think that cost line, or cost base of permanent employee, I think organizations are beginning to move away from that. And I've certainly seen that trend. I don't know if you'd agree, since the Great Recession back in 2007, 2008, you really seen the emergence of companies like Uber, the gig platforms, and some elements of the platformization of work, right? And that move from a fixed employee cost model to a variable cost model of really hiring gig workers, independent contractors, freelancers, right? Do you see that trend continuing, is my question, Will?
Yeah, I do. And I think it should. I think that again, the talent is telling us that we should do this. The talent is saying that I want to do this thing, and this is the one thing that gives me passion, hope, and joy. And if we can't harness that, then what are we doing here, right? We need to harness that, and companies need to harness that. If we can find the talent that they show up every day and they can code until their eyes bleed, and that's what makes them happy, then, man, imagine what the kind of code you're going to get, right? That's the stuff that I think that, is driving, right? I think that the gig economy is, I think, a real thing. Now, I don't necessarily agree that we're going to get to like 60 or 70% of gig worker, everybody wanting to be gig workers. I just don't think that's going to happen. Now with the knowledge workers, right? When we talk about IT and in that space, absolutely. I think that's a potential, but there's a lot, there's a reason that the talent wants to work this way, because I think the old way of doing things and you working 9 to 5 on monotonous stuff that doesn't really mean much to you, and sitting in your cube or whatever it might be and staring at a screen and doing stuff that you really genuinely dislike.
Yeah.
Like, why would we not want to find people that, everybody's got their thing that they like to do. Me, I love contingent labor programs. I love all that are involved in them. If you put me in a bank doing spreadsheets, I would go absolutely crazy, because it just doesn't bring me joy, happiness, or anything. So, but there's a place for people to find that space that really drives them. And I think that the gig economy allows them that opportunity to find what really brings them that joy and brings them that happiness in a work environment. And I think that we should really accept that that's where we're going. And like I said, I don't think it's going to go as dramatic as some of the reports have said in the past, but I do think that it's a real thing that will and it's got a heartbeat to it. And I think that we can tap into that and feed off of that as a company, or not necessarily with Fandool, but just every company out there. Not just with Fandool, but like with every company out there. If you can tap into that heartbeat and that passion that people have and what makes them happy, yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, then we start to see that scarcity go away. We start to see that the progress being made towards kind of that open talent concept, where you can actually tap into the resources that you need at the given time that you need them. And those are that's what I'm really excited about, that space. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be really cool to see. I think companies that get it right and figure out a way to do it are going to be just miles ahead of everybody else. And I'm really excited for how that space progresses over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I share that passion, hope, and joy for the open talent sector and the gig economy. Well, I think it's so exciting. I think if it's done right and planned right, I think it can really help people and help organizations. Like, look, I've looked at this a lot over the years, Will, but it strikes me you've almost got two markets. So in the gig and open talent economy, you've got what I would describe as the high choice, high cost, or high rate worker, right? That she or he or they can negotiate the best price. They're typically highly paid, highly skilled professionals of some description, right? They can work where they want, go where they want. They can name their price, right? For me, that part of the market doesn't really need regulated, right? I think let the market work itself out. But then in the gig economy and the platform economy, you've got those lower level workers, the people who are, as I would describe it harshly, it's not to be harsh on them, but it's a rather harsh term, of low choice, no choice. And what I mean by that, Will, is typically they're economic migrants, they're at the lower socioeconomic classes, and they really need this work, and they're dependent on those platforms for work, right? And typically those workers don't have high choice. They don't have high bargaining power, right? They might go from one platform to the other, but the matza ain't going to change, right? It ain't going to be dynamic, right? It ain't going to better their lives, right? So my view on that is that those workers do need protection, and there does need to be regulations around that. And we've seen some moves actually in Europe around the EU directive on platform workers. I won't go into this. It's a whole podcast in itself, right? But anyway, my question is, do you agree that there should be regulation to help out those low choice, no choice folks?
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that. I think that there should be opportunities. I mean, look, I think everybody in these high level roles, me, you included, at one point in time, we were given a chance. We were given a chance to do better and grow. And, I'm infinitely thankful for the people that gave me that chance. Kid out of college who had no idea what recruiting was. Somebody gave me a chance to do that, and I found a passion that has driven me to my career, right? And I think that I think a lot of times companies and organizations don't remember that point in time in their life where somebody gave them a chance. And I think that we need to do better. I think we can do better. And I think a lot of times, I really think if we could sit down and look at internal recruiting and how it meshes with contingent workers, that's a way to really start to bring that talent up and kind of elevate them to future state. I think a lot of companies think about contingent labor as plug and play, right? They take one in, they put them out, they take one in and plug them out. Instead of thinking about how can you contribute to the experience that they have with your organization and make them want to be part of your organization and grow with you. And then how can you harness their growth opportunities or growth desires? And so that weighs on me every once in a while on how that could work or should work. And I don't know I'm sure somebody's got it right out there and figured out how to do it. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to find that opportunity, find those chances to harness the talent and not forget that at one point in time, we all were given a chance.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really grateful to all those that took a chance on me and and in many cases, they took a chance on me and they gave me a chance. So thanks for that. But like, I think you raised really interesting and profound points there, Will, on that topic. I'm really glad we're in agreement on that point. So, Will, we talked about working in the cube earlier, right? And I think you and I have both been lucky in our careers for all the reasons we've discussed thus far, to have people to support us, give us the opportunity to take a chance on us. But I think from my perspective, one of the best things that has ever happened to me was working remotely. And I began my remote journey back in, by 2012, 2013, right? And now I'm privileged to lead a fully remote and distributed company here in Europe since 2015, right? Which is great. We were ahead of the curve, but it wasn't that we were bloody, soothsayers. We just had no money when we were starting out. We couldn't afford all these big offices everywhere, right? And so it was more a cost play than anything else. That's largely benefited us, Will, on numerous fronts. But in relation to remote work, Will, what's your take on it? Do you believe it's a really good thing, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated thing. I think it depends on the personality, right? I think that some people can live and operate in a remote work environment. I think some people can't. Personally, I'm a remote worker. I love it. It gives me a chance to continuously be with my young children, and my daughters mean the world to me. So being with them being able to see them every day and take them to school, all that stuff is important to me. So it allows me to be the present dad that I want to be. But I also know that it's a privilege to have this kind of opportunity, and that a privilege, like we talked about those no choice or low choice workers. Some of them don't have that, and it does weigh on me and I think about that often, that how lucky I am to have the privilege to work remote, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity. But it's tough to see some people that don't get that opportunity to be as present as we are, me and my wife. But I think remote is a good thing. Now, I will say too, personally, I miss the office. I do. I miss the office environment. If I'm honest with myself, and I don't know if that comes, I think I had so much fun working with, in a staffing agency that I often want that camaraderie back. And that was I had such a good time doing that with, a bunch of like-minded people and really, just that crazy work environment. I don't know, part of me has always kind of, wanted to go back to that every once in a while just because of how much fun it was and that, but I do miss the office. I think there's something to be said for that. I think there is something to be said for the office environment, but I do think remote work I find it to be an overall benefit. If you can give people kind of comfort in their working environment, I believe that you can generate better results.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it should be considered a privilege on multiple bases, but not a right. And I agree with you, although I've enjoyed the benefits of it over the last, 11, 12 years, right? Well, I do miss elements of the office. I miss having a base, right? I miss that buzz, right? I live in the middle of nowhere now. Of course, I travel a lot with the business I lead and run, but I miss that buzz, right? And you, I started my career in human capital in the staffing sector, and we used to get in at 7 a.m. every morning. We'd all go to the gym together. Before that, we were super competitive. We were all buddies, but people used to compete to get into the office first, right? Which is insane when you think about it, but it made us quite successful. So we'd come in at 7, we'd work to 7, and maybe later. Most nights we'd be out entertaining clients or going out to socialize with each other. And that was a great time. Like, I was in my mid to late 20s, no real responsibilities, Will, at that stage, right? As I'm older now,
maybe that's what we miss, is those no responsibilities.
Exactly. I think there's something in that, Will. But equally, in fairness to you, I think there's something in what you said. There is an element of camaraderie that's difficult to produce and reproduce in a virtual and remote environment. We do our best here in the company I run, right? But it's not perfect, right? And in fact, any survey that we've done over the last 9 months, actually, there's the one commonality is that people still want to meet, right? They want to still get together in an office. They don't want the strictures, though, of saying, hey, you got to be in the office at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. every single day, or even every single week. Yeah. But they want that opportunity and that flexibility to do so, because to a theme that's emerged throughout our conversation, Will, today, we're fundamentally first people, right? So we want to spend time with like-minded people and people that we can learn from and enjoy their company. So yeah, it's a really great conversation. So, Will, I want to finish, if we can, and if you've got time, really ask you a question that we ask all our guests, which is the following. Now, I know no one can predict the future, but we're going to give it a stab, Will. So what, if any, Will, is your prediction or predictions for the future of work?
I believe that that the future of work is changing. But I also believe that definition is yet to be written. I think that we are in a very early stages of kind of the next iteration of contingent labor 2.0. What that means is yet to be determined. And I think that's what I look forward to a lot, is that I think that there's so much change that's going to be available for us, that if we can start thinking differently and seeing kind of the writing on the wall that change is coming, how can we harness that and be involved in the change? And that's, for me, I think from a program side, we're going to see a lot of people naturally progressing in their career and start to bring some new thoughts. So I think new thoughts leads to new ways. I think that there's going to be a change in how we engage talent. I think the talent is going to want to be engaged in different ways, and I think the gig economy is going to continue to expand. I think AI is going to be impactful in a good way, my opinion. I think we're going to find some good out of AI. I don't think we're going to lose 60% of the workforce to AI. I think that there's, I really think that sitting in the industry right now, being a part of the way of working right now, we're in a unique position to write the definition for contingent labor or the way of working 2.0. And that, I think, is a really exciting place to be.
I agree. It's really bloody exciting, Will. So, Will, thank you very much for your time. Thanks so much for our conversation. I've really enjoyed what I would describe as your fresh perspective on the sector and the industry. I personally, I'm trying to avoid the term industry, right? It's one of my pet hates because we're not producing anything, and that's what industries do. But I don't think I've got very few followers about this, right? So I'm just going to have to get over it. But, Will, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much for affording me and our listeners the time today. And it's been a blast, and I wish you every success with your program at Fandool. And, Will, if our listeners want to reach out, tap into that brain of yours, tap into that more fresh, more modern way of thinking and doing, where's the best place to find you, Will? Where are you comfortable people reaching out to you?
Yeah, first off, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I really, really love the topics we talked about today. So it's been really exciting to kind of express my opinions, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. LinkedIn's always the best way to find me. I'm pretty active on there. I think that's how we connected. So I always keep track of that and what's going on in the kind of the buzz in the industry. So please reach out to me there. Love to connect. Love to see, keep sharing my thoughts and help out where I can. I think that's one of the things that we really need to be doing as an industry, is helping each other come along on the ride together. Industry, I guess, from your perspective, I guess. I don't know, maybe category? Is that cool?
Yeah,
category.
Go on.
Is that better?
Thanks. Well, listen, whatever you want to call it. It's just my weird obsessive compulsive disorder.
Hey, and if you don't mind, I'd like to say like one quick thing. My little brother is graduating high school today. So just a quick shout out to Jackson, graduating top 10 in his class, going to UNC next year. So just I want to shout him out. So I'm super proud of him and want to take that opportunity if you don't mind.
Good on you, Will. Well, best of luck to Jackson Ulmer, and every success to him, but also every success to you, Will. And thanks so much for that, and thanks for your time. Well, we keep in touch. Yeah. All the best.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Connor.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.